Hi, my name is Harit, and in today's video, I'm trying to demystify the word LLMs and the real world so that it becomes easier when someone talks about it to give it a shape in our mind to know what they might be talking about. Now, looking at the screen, this is a typical program that as a programmer we write. We have function or functions that take certain inputs and they generate certain outputs. And in between that function implementation, we do certain things. It's a business logic. But in a procedural world, we write a very fixed logic of what that function might look like. Now, in this screen, that box represents different services such as ChatGPT, Claude, or DeepSeek. And if you have used one of these services, you are already leveraging or using LLMs. Now, just to confirm that ChatGPT, Claude, or DeepSeek are the services that we use that use large language models behind the scenes. And I'm going to showcase one of the examples so that you can assert what I'm saying is correct. But these are services that leverage large language model behind the scenes. But in the overall aspect, it's still a program that takes input, generates output, and does something in between. But in this in-between thing has changed because of large language models. But it's not only the thing in between, it's also that the inputs and outputs have changed when we interact with large language models. So what do I mean with that? So on the input side, these large language models, they are capable of not just taking text as input, they can take files, images, videos, and they're also capable of generating all these artifacts and not just text. And because of this, certain set of large language models are also known as multi-modal models. The modality here means more than one way of understanding or creating the output. Now, if you're looking at a model and you don't know if it is text to text or text to something else, or if it can take any other input, I will show you one useful tool that I have recently figured out. And let me take you there. So it's a website called as models.dev. And over here, you can see who are the providers, what is the model name, and over right, you will see input and output. See how it says text, which means that Qwen 3 Coder Plus take text as the input and generate text as the output. But if you take another example, which is for Claude Haiku model, and the provider is Amazon Bedrock, you can see that it takes text as the input, image as the input, and generate text as the output. And this showcases that this is a model. So going back to the screen, if we take an example from where we were earlier, so we were taking in text as input and generating text and text as output, these large language models have changed that part as well. So you can take any of this modality and you can generate any of the modality if you're a developer using their APIs. Now, we're still not talking about the large language model, the thing, the box in between. How do we understand or how do we visualize when someone talks about the large language models? One thing that I find very useful is when I replace this word with a brain. Now, consider this as a brain that knows a lot of things. And if you have used ChatGPT or any other interface to interact with large language models, you might be surprised in how much information they know. You talk about any aspect of the problem, programming, health-related, tech, or generating the images. It knows so much and does so well. So the analogy that I draw that it is kind of a brain, but it is a much more or evolved brain, which means that it has learned a large amount of information in a short amount of time. And in my experience, in some aspects, it does really well. So then the question becomes, if it is a brain, how did this brain learn? For example, if we take the evolution of a human child, when the child is born, they're not capable of talking. They don't understand anything. But as they learn from their parents and relatives and friends, they start to shape up their vocabulary. They learn in the school. That becomes their part of their asset. It becomes part of their brain. But then in this case of the large language models, how do they learn? The answer to that is that the companies who provide these models, they take the information publicly available on the internet. This could be websites, this could be PDFs, this could be videos, and then they use the training method that is special to them in the case of closed source models. But in the case of open source model that I will touch later in one of the future videos, you can also read how they have trained their models. And with that training model, they develop this brain. And when we talk about developing the brain, it really means it's a very large function with certain set of weights. Now, if this term is new to you, don't worry about it because in future videos, I'm going to exactly talk about what they mean. But in terms of simplifying this, let's stick to the concept of having a brain. So this brain knows a lot of information because the providers who are teaching or developing these brains have taken the information available on the public internet and used specialized training methods to come to the point where we can interact with this brain. Now, how you can leverage this brain? Now, there are many ways you can do that. Now, first way is you can increase your own productivity. So if you use ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Claude, I'm sure that you can use things like email summarization, creating the emails, or transforming a certain set of information, let's say from table to JSON, and all those kind of things. So you're already leveraging by and becoming more productive. So this is just one part. The other part is that if you are a developer, you can make life easier for your own customers or organization that use your service. And the way you can do that is by leveraging the APIs or interacting with the LLM provider APIs directly. Now, if I take you to the models.dev example, as you can see that these providers are giving access to the models directly, and they provide that with a certain set of cost. And I will create a separate video on the cost. Right now, we are only sticking to what this brain is. But the idea is that you can access all of these models in your own programs to bring efficiency for your own customers and organizations. And that's the other way. Now, if you remember, I talked about having this brain, but I didn't touch about this icon, which is the calendar. So all of these models that we use today, they have been trained on a data, but there is a cutoff time. There's a cutoff time on which this training was completed. So, which means that if you use OpenAI's model today, it will be coming with a certain set of cutoff date, which means any new information after that, if you're trying to find answer to, you may not get the correct information. And let me show you how you can find this information yourself. If I go back to the platform.openai docs, you can see all these models here, GPT 4.1, O4 mini. If I click on any of these, you will see that it says June 1st, 2024 cutoff, which means that this model is fantastic. But if you're trying to answer a question that is based on recent event or anything after June 1st, 2024, you may not get the correct answer. The models may hallucinate, and we know that models do hallucinate. And if this word hallucination is new to you, put a comment below and I will write why they really hallucinate, because it depends upon how these brains have been trained. Now, another example we can look at, if we can go to Anthropic. Anthropic is the company that has a service called Claude. They have a page where they say, for example, Claude 4 Sonnet was trained on data until March 2025, which means if you're trying to access or trying to get the answer based on event in April 2025, you may not get the correct information. So just keep that in mind, that all these brains have been trained with a cutoff date, and after which the recent information may not be available. And as these companies continue this process of training new models, the new models will come with their own new cutoff date. So I hope that this was useful. But before we go, as I promised, that I will show you that the services that we use, such as ChatGPT or Claude, they are services and not large language models. Let me show you how you can find this yourself. So let me go to chatgpt.com. I'm currently logged in, and let me open the developer console. And I will ask it to tell me a joke. And as you can see, there are things that are going on in here. So there is interaction that is happening with the server. Let me just make this a little bigger. But I have not sent this yet. So let me clear all the network activity and just hit send. So as you can see, we got the response on the left, and it felt like ChatGPT is a large language model. But what happened behind the scenes is, if you look at this conversation, this is saying chatgpt.com backend-API. If I click on this, in the response tab, you will see a lot of data streaming in. Now, as you can see, the work starts from here on the patch P. And as we can see, the first word that came in, why don't skeleton fight each other? So really the response started from here. where the data type is P. And it says why down. And as you can see that this is not a request response cycle, which means it's not the complete response that came in. It was using streaming, which is why we are getting the response in parts. So as you can see, this entire data came back to us by interacting with large language models. And what was the large language model that we use here? As you can see on the left, there's no mention, but if we click on switch model, it picked auto by itself. But if I click on GPT-4o, let me just clear this and run it again. Run this again. Now we are using ChatGPT 4.1 mini. And if I click on the conversation here again, as you can see, sure, here you go, is what came in the API response. So just to give you some context, or to rephrase again, if someone talks about large language models, these are really programs that know a lot of information, just like a brain. And these brains have been trained on large amounts of public data that is available. Each company have their own brains, which also means that the brain are different from one another, just like humans have brains, but they have different amount of information and different length of information. So a brain from Anthropic, which is Claude, will be different from a brain produced by OpenAI, which is O3 or O3 mini. And these models, they have a fixed cutoff time, which means they have word knowledge, but up until a time period, but nothing after that until they release a new model with a new version. So I hope that this was useful. If this was, and if there were things that were confusing or were new to you, please write a comment below, and I will do my best to produce new videos that can make this learning journey easier for you. Until we meet next time, keep learning, and I will see you soon.